Will you be under rent control attack? This would be like bombing American cities. Just before Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race, he presented the White House's rent control plan capping rents, and this is a proven, surefire way to limit building of new housing and make existing housing become dilapidated. I'll tell you why. And this is all amidst what's already an American housing supply shortage crisis. Let's look at just how bad rent control is and what kind of threat this has. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold, Get Rich Education founder, Forbes Real Estate Council member, best-selling author, and longtime real estate investor. Some say they took the car keys away from Grandpa. Since Biden dropped out of the presidential race, the White House's recent what I'll call rent control light plan is still out there, and large apartment landlords feel like they are under attack. The rent cap plan would apply to you if you own 50 or more units. That's mostly apartment owners. Very few landlords own 50 plus single family rentals. Let's tie this in with the housing and rental market's direction first. Since COVID hit the US back in March of 2020, entry-level home prices are up 43%, that's the blue line here. Single-family rents are up 25%, the green line, and single-family rental owners would be largely untouched by a rent control plan. And then apartment rents are up 18%, the red line, and they would largely be included in a White House rent control plan. Before we leave the chart, apartment rents have grown less than single-family home rents because apartments had an influx of supply. There's been tons of new apartment construction the past 2 years. Now, sure, political news has been galactic lately with, the Trump shooting and then the Biden dropout and the Kamala Harris endorsement and the DNC nominee questions. Before we break down rent control, politics matter here, but not as much as a lot of people think, and we rarely talk politics here at GRE for a few reasons. Number one, it's divisive. People lose their minds. Second, speculation about the future is cheap. There is one known. Like it or not, expect President Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. to be your president into 2025, whether you like it or not. Yep. And thirdly, politics is just overblown overall. The president rarely changes your life anyway, but you can change your life. That's good news. Your autonomy, your decisions, your lack of victim mentality, you're the one empowered to change your life. Our current president won't save you. Our next president will be different from our current president. We know that, but we know that they won't save you either. So let's avoid the politics and stick to the facts on a one-issue subject. The White House revealed what I'll call a rent control light plan recently, right here. And to give some credit to the plan first, it also repurposes public land to build more affordable housing, and America really needs that. What else was proposed is the rent control. It's limited, hence a light plan as I'm calling it, but it's the type of plan that we want squashed. If a property owner increases rent more than 5% annually, it would reduce tax incentives for large landlords. Now, you could still do it, but you might lose federal tax benefits. Secondly, it would only have lasted for 2 years, and they're kind of trying to build this bridge to a time when they expect that more homes will be built with this plan. And then thirdly, again, this all would have only applied to owners of 50 plus units. So we're talking about mostly apartment owners. Single family rental owners would be largely untouched. But consider how apartment owners could lose their accelerated depreciation benefit, also known as a cost segregation. That could kill investors from wanting to buy into new apartment building deals. Since Biden dropped out after this was proposed, just after it was proposed, it remains to be seen if it would continue under a Kamala Harris administration or someone else. But look, we do know this. Harris has been a steady proponent of rent control. She praised Oregon for adopting the nation's first state-level rent controls back in 2019. And of course, here at GRE, we avoid West Coast investing and stick mostly to the Midwest and South, some parts of the inland Northeast. And then recently, right here on X, Kamala endorsed a nationwide cap on rent increases. Okay, here's the real deal. And then the lesson. This all has almost zero chance of becoming law. Even if it survived under the next president, and Trump would kill it, it would have to pass the giant hurdle of a divided Congress. That's where it would die. And this whole thing is just a bunch of virtue signaling to try to show that something is being done to rein in housing inflation. Gosh, well, this is a weird thing. Since the inflation in housing and groceries and everywhere else, it came from the government in the first place. Sheesh, this is like shooting someone in the foot and then trying to get praise for bandaging it. You're trying to cure the problem that you began in the first place. Rent control is a bad idea. It puts a cap on rents. And time after time, history shows us that it makes developers stop building. I mean, literally, because recently in Minneapolis-St. Paul, cranes stopped mid-air from apartment construction when they proposed a cap on rents there. And also, landlords would have no incentive to improve property. Just ask yourself, how much would you improve your property if you could only get 5% more in rent annually, all while your expenses rise the entire time? And now this particular White House plan, that had a carve out for new builds and substantially renovated properties, sparing them from the rent caps. But see, this is all why rent control, it reduces housing supply, and it's already low, and it creates long-term dilapidated living conditions. Landlords won't improve or even repair property. I mean, how weird to even make such an ill-advised proposal. And look, this is like the same anywhere. If the government puts a price cap of, say, $20,000 on new cars, or makes a $2 price cap for a quart of milk, well, car lots and milk shelves will soon be empty. I mean, have you ever seen pictures of bread lines in communist countries? Well, just the same, landlords would stop providing housing, and the pushback on the White House was swift. President Obama's top economist Jason Furman, he said it best in the Washington Post, rent control has been about as disgraced as any economic policy in the toolkit. The idea that we'd be reviving and expanding it will ultimately make our housing supply problems worse, not better. 94% of economists agreed that rent control reduces the quality and quantity of housing available, and it's the most effective way to destroy a city aside from bombing. And if you doubt this and you ever want to read more, my heavily flagged classic book, The Brilliant Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, it demonstrates this terrifically. It gives all types of economic examples that a policy that benefits a small group in the short term, like rent control, or just say $60 minimum wage, that hurts everyone in the long term. I mean, you can imagine how a $60 minimum wage could help, say, 10 restaurant employees for a year, but it would kill the business because they'd have to raise prices so much to pay their employees that they would soon longer have any customers. In rent control and elsewhere, look at history over hunches. This rent control proposal has almost zero chance. What a weird piece of window dressing in an election year, effectively bombing American cities slowly. Now, what's really next for the housing market? Well, the most dangerous drinking game this year is still sipping at every mention of the interest rate lock-in effect on a real estate podcast. Though it's been 2+ years since they made their dramatic rise, a lot of people are still transfixed on mortgage rates. Well, they just hit a 5-month low in the high 6s, and many still expect mortgage rates to fall between today and next year, since inflation has plunged from a high of 9.1% back in June of 2022 down to 3% now. 85% of experts believe that the Fed will announce an interest rate cut by September, but whenever they do that, be ready. When mortgage rates fall substantially, millions more buyers will qualify to buy a home, and this could substantially stoke housing demand and lift up housing prices even further. As for today, be mindful that history proves rent control is the wrong policy. I'm Keith Weinhold. I'll see you in the next video. You can watch this one next.